The H510 Elite Compact ATX Mid Tower is a RGB focused build. So there is the H510 Compact, and then there's the H510i, and then now the Elite. The kind of special things about this particular case is it does include two ARGB fans. They are on the front of the case and they're 140 millimeter. You are going to have the Cam Link software as well as the Cam Link RGB controller included in this case, and it does come with one RGB strip on the top of the case as well. You may want to add some additional. It should be easy to daisy chain them, as coming off of that RGB strip is your standard 3-pin connector, so you can just connect up some additional fans that are compatible, or of course you could also do some additional RGB strips as well. It does include two more fans, a single 120 millimeter in the rear and a single 140 millimeter in the top. They are non-RGB, so if you're wanting to get some additional lights in the case, you can of course order some RGB fans with the case when you do that. Now that is going to increase, of course, your investment into the case. It does come in at $149, and you're probably looking at spending another $60 on RGB fans if you want to match those two. And that's just a little kind of note there for you to keep in mind. Now this particular model is the black on black. They only have one other color offering in this particular set, and that's going to be a white on black aesthetic, and it's really up to you which one you prefer. There are more color options in the H510i, so you know, if you're looking for more color options, maybe you can get that for like $99 and then pick up the RGB separate. Just something to keep in mind. Hopping into the specifications, dimensions are 210 millimeters wide, 435 millimeters high, and 428 millimeters deep. And that is without the feet. With the feet, it is going to be 460 millimeters high, and you're going to want to keep the feet intact if you're going to go with the standard configuration of the install of the power supply, because it does suck air from the bottom, luckily through a removable and cleanable filter. The front, however, does not have a removable filter, as they are kind of riveted in with plastic. If you try to remove it, you're probably going to break it, so you will just have to take the side panel off, and luckily that is a workaround, as you can take the side panel off and then clean that filter for the front intake. The materials are steel and tempered glass. You do have a black coating. The black coating on the main panels is very solid. However, when you move into the internal panels or the internal workings of the case, the coating, the black paint coating, does come off pretty easily. Anytime you're removing screws, from the bottom even, I did notice that we did scratch up the case when we were removing the hard drive bay, for example. And speaking of hard drive bays, you have 2+1 2.5-inch bay support and 2+1 3.5-inch bay support, just so you are aware of what you support as far as that goes. Your clearance is cable management 19 to 23 millimeters, GPU clearance up to 368.6 millimeters without front radiator installed, and up to 313.6 millimeters with a front radiator installed. The nice thing about the radiator front mount is that it does support both 140 millimeter and of course 120 millimeter fans, going all the way up to a 280 millimeter radiator support in the front. It is water cooling friendly, super simple to install. It's similar to what Corsair has done or implemented in the front of their cases, where you basically just uninstall the bracket with 2 screws, pull it out, and then install your radiator as well as your fans, and then install the bracket back in, and you're good to go. Super clean, super easy to install, and I appreciate that design very much. Next, you have a vertical GPU mount with a clearance of 40.64 millimeters. You'll want to keep that in mind. A little taller, like let's say the XFX RX 5700 XTs, where they are a 2.9 slot card, will not fit in that rig, so you'll need to have a standard 2-slot card is what the support is for that. Otherwise you're going to be banging up against the glass. To support the vertical mount, you will also need to have a PCI riser, which I'll link down in the description below, along with the case in case you want a vertical mount. Now, vertical mounting is going to decrease, in most cases, the airflow to the GPU, so keep that in mind. It may run a little hotter. However, you get those sweet, sweet looks, and if you're ordering an RGB case, I'm assuming that's kind of what you're going for. The other kind of caveat to that is you could go water cooled, right? So if you're water cooled on that GPU with a vertical mount, it's going to look fantastic, and then you're not going to have the same cooling issues there at all. In fact, the cooling should be a little bit better when we're talking about water cooling, not just because of the water block, but also because the airflow will be running over the back of the GPU there, keeping the rear components a little bit cool, or the rear side of the components a little bit cooler. All right, so we've covered the GPU mounting, and let's talk about the CPU cooler. You can go up to 165 millimeters on the CPU cooler height, so keep that in mind. However, once again, this is going to be leaning towards, at the very least, probably an AIO for looks, and if you're going to go with an AIO, once again, that front support is going to be up to 280 millimeters in the front for that rad. And then if you're going custom liquid cooling, you have support for up to a 280 millimeter radiator in the front, with a 140 millimeter radiator in the top, and support for a 120 millimeter radiator in the rear. So you should have enough to basically cool at least, a CPU and a single GPU. However, if you're looking at maybe doing SLI or Crossfire or multi-GPU rigs, you may want to look at a different case, maybe going all the way up to the 710i, or going all together with something I would probably recommend, like a Lee or something along those lines, if you're going to go that route. Now, the front and rear radiator supports are up to 60 millimeters thick, at least advertised. I did not test that, but I know that for now, of course, the 30 millimeter fits in just fine. You could probably even go thicker, honestly, on the front, because there is nothing really blocking it until you get to the cable management bars. But if you're going to go in front of the case instead, or in front of the bracket instead of the rear of the bracket, then you need to take into account the thickness of the fans and the thickness of the radiator, and those are going to need to be under 60 millimeters. That being said, like I said, you can mount the radiator on the back side of that bracket, and then you get some more room. Reservoir and pump up to 180 millimeters along cable bar, and up to 86 millimeters along bottom panel. Motherboard support goes all the way up to ATX, with support for micro ATX and mini ITX as well. Your front I/O ports include one USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type C, one USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type A, one headset audio jack, and a front I/O internal header. The header is super clean and comes ready to go into a standard front panel header, so you don't have to fumble around with all individual pins for your power, reset, light, and so on. I really like that simplification of things as well. In case you don't have a standard motherboard though, with the standard front panel output, which I haven't seen one of those in forever, it does include an adapter so you can make the adjustment. All air intakes advertised for filters, but that's kind of a little deceptive. So yes, all air intakes, as the case is designed, do have filters, but the 120 millimeter exhaust in the rear and the 140 millimeter exhaust in the top do not have air filters. So if you're going to do a reverse configuration, this would not be filtered, and you just need to keep that in mind. It's a little deceptive when they word it like that, in my humble opinion. You do have the Smart Device version 2, which includes 3 fan channels with a max of 10 watts per channel output, 2 RGB LED channels, each support up to 4 Hue 2 addressable LED strips, or 5 AER RGB2 fans. Built-in noise detection module as well, so you can keep the noise under control with the CAM software. If a splitter is used, fan control is regulated depending on the fan connected to the 4-pin port. Do not use low noise adapters. This is going to be something that comes with for example, the Noctua CPU coolers. So you're not going to want to use that adapter with this particular module if you do end up going with a Noctua, for example. Now, the fans that come with the case are going to go from 500 to 1500 RPMs with an advertised airflow of 30 to 91 CFM, which is pretty dang good, and noise between 22 and 33 decibels. Air pressure of 0.17 to 1.52 millimeters. And the bearing is a fluid dynamic bearing. You are getting high quality fans in here. The fan connector is a 4-pin PWM in case you want to bypass the fan/RGB cam controller. You have a 2-year warranty, and that wraps up all the specifications for the case. Building into the case, the thoughts are this: if you built into an NZXT case in the past, this is going to be a breeze. You have the cable management bar along with all of the cable management straps and pathways on the rear of the panel, making it a super simple and intuitive install process. Once again, the radiator install is probably one of the most simple out there right now, simple designs, and you can do that, of course, with pretty much a lot of other Corsair cases now and NZXT cases as well. The front panel is removable, but there is not a mesh replacement. You are going to be depending on intake all from the filtered intake on the rear side panel, and the front will not have any intakes at all on the front left panel where the glass is. So you only have that one intake, and it can be a little bit starved. If you're looking for, of course, the best airflow, you're going to want to go with a mesh front panel design, maybe from another company. They have some that support both, you know, the glass and the mesh fronts, and you should know who I'm talking about. Kudos to the person in the comment section who can name that case. And I mean, that's going to be something that you need to take into consideration. If you're wanting the best performance of the parts installed in the rig at the coolest temperatures possible, this case is probably not the one. However, for ease of use, included components, all the RGB stuff, and the price point, this case comes in at a steal. And it's really hard for me to not recommend it, because anybody that gets this case and builds into it is going to be excited with the end results, provided they've ever built in anything before and even have the slightest inkling or ability to cable manage. So it's not even, it's super duper simple. You're gonna come out with a clean build. If you need help with cable management and there's something confusing and you want to know where that cable needs to be run, you can hit me up in Discord. I'll leave the link down in the description below, and I'll be happy to help you. So without further ado, here is the picture of the rig once we had it fully assembled. We're rocking an MSI RTX 2070 with the Intel i7-10700K and 16 gigs of memory running at 3200 megahertz. We have a 1 terabyte SSD, which is SATA over M.2, and we are running an 850 watt Corsair power supply. Links for all of the PC build parts will be in the description below as well. And if you are interested in the build video, be sure you let me know so I can kind of plan out when the build video for that particular one comes out, including some built-in benchmarks, of course, so you can get an idea of the performance. We did end up going with an MSI 240 millimeter cooler AIO, and the reason for that is we didn't have the NZXT option currently available in stores, and I needed one right then. That being said, I've been very impressed with the MSI 240 millimeter AIO because it has an INRAD pump and the temperatures were